Hey guys, it's the Terminator, and following on the heels of my last Olympia review, I wanted to go back and revisit another old competition. This was the highly contentious 2002 Mr. Olympia, where reigning champion Ronnie Coleman managed to fend off some strong contenders in the form of runner-up Kevin Levrone and fifth-place finisher Gunter Schlierkamp. Now, if 2003 represented Coleman at his biggest and best, 2002 was probably his worst and smallest package. This was a very underwhelming version of Ronnie, and he left the door wide open for an upset. Indeed, the fans in attendance were pissed when Levrone was announced in second, and a chorus of boos rained down, marring Coleman's fifth consecutive victory celebration. And to make matters worse, the fans were even more irate and vocal when Gunter was announced in fifth. Luckily for the IFBB, a potential riot was averted when Gunter gestured for the crowd to simmer down rather than riling them up even further. A class act through and through, the German giant expressed nothing but humility and gratitude for their applause and support, saying how that meant more to him than the placing itself. But before we dive into this one and start breaking things down, I've got a confession to make here. Okay, so I cannot definitively tell you who deserved to win this year's Mr. Olympia. So here's the thing, this event took place a couple years before I started watching the Mr. O live, so I didn't see the full contest. And the internet had barely taken off at that point, so it was only available through pay-per-view, either satellite or cable networks, I'm not sure. Point is, it wasn't readily accessible. To make matters worse, few comparison photos have survived to today. I've scoured the usual websites and old forum threads, but still couldn't find good shots of certain mandatories like the side chest or back lat spread. No doubt much of it has been archived or deleted from servers years ago. I encountered quite a few dead links during my research. And as for the video footage, wow, if you guys think today's web streams are bad, you ain't seen nothing, man. The 2002 Mr. Olympia literally looks like it was filmed in a dark, divey nightclub. It was so dimly lit and blurry, you couldn't make heads or tails of anything. Conditioning got completely washed out. I was originally going to review this contest years ago after I covered 2001, and now I remember why I didn't. Simply put, the surviving footage and photo galleries are insufficient. And that's probably why, to this day, I don't think I've seen anybody make a proper review of this contest. It's mostly just a bunch of ranting and whining about how Gunter got robbed, and then they show the same 2 or 3 photos of him outmassing Ronnie in the most muscular. You know, the usual YouTube fluff with a lot of opinion, but little substance behind it. Well, I'm going to try my best to provide a more thorough analysis than that, but just know that a review of this nature can only be as good as the available evidence. So don't expect this one to be as satisfying as my usual Olympia critiques. Anyway, let's go through some poses and then we'll wrap things up by checking out the official scores and I'll give my concluding thoughts. So one small blessing is that we do have an unusual abundance of semi-relaxed shots. For whatever reason, the photographers really went crazy with these, but it's like they fell asleep after the symmetry round since pictures of mandatories were much more scarce. In this front relaxed, it's close, but my money's on Levrone. Ronnie's definitely thicker with the more muscular quads, but Kevin's midsection is so much better, and I prefer his upper body outline and structure. But then again, the angle is clearly in his favor. He looks a couple inches taller than Ronnie, when in reality they were closer to the same height. Ronnie might have been an inch taller than him, if anything. But hang on, not so fast there, guys. Here's a second look, and now I think Ronnie is edging him out. Levrone's midsection doesn't look as tight and sharp, and his legs are also waning. Ronnie is dismantling him downstairs, and in terms of the upper body, he's just so much thicker and wider through the chest and lats. We don't get a third look, so without a tiebreaker, I'm just gonna give this one a draw, I guess. Kevin's physique is more symmetrical, but despite the name, the symmetry round judges everything, not just symmetry, and Ronnie is definitely beating him on muscularity. As for the side relaxed, this belongs to Levrone, no questions asked. Yes, the angle is off, but even so, it's not close. Kevin looks like a beast with massive, full arms, pecs, and delts, and a highly defined midsection. His posture and bearing are excellent here. Ronnie, in contrast, looks awkward and unsure of himself. He never seemed to hit the side relaxed effectively. He honestly looks the worst of the entire top 6 right now, and that's mainly due to terrible presentation. Here's a screenshot I took of the video footage, and yeah, can you see what I mean about the quality and lighting being total shite? This isn't even judgeable on its own merits, but I wanted to give you a head-on look to prove that last photo wasn't a fluke. Ronnie still looks bad here. He's not rotating the torso enough, and that makes him appear thin and narrow compared to the others. But as for the rear relaxed, that's a whole other ballgame. Coleman absolutely tramples him. Levrone frankly looks like an amateur here, way too soft and shallow from the rear. Ronnie has just layers of carved beef in that back, with the lower lats forming a perfect Christmas tree. His glutes are far and away the most peeled as well. Chris Cormier, to his left, is actually holding his own reasonably well. His back is extremely thick and defined, and his traps rival Ronnie's. The lats, however, are not nearly as wide, and he doesn't come close to matching his conditioning in the glutes and hamstrings. Alright, so that concludes the symmetry round. I had Coleman winning the back, Levrone the side, and it was a toss-up from the front. In the front double biceps. Yeah, see, this is what I warned you about. This was the only front double comparison I could find, and it only includes Ronnie and Kevin, and they're cropped off at the knees. Ugh. Anyway, Levrone's out-angling him, but I think he wins this. Ronnie's stomach is just too big and bloated looking, so despite possessing better biceps and quads, Kevin's overall flow and proportions probably put him ahead. However, I'm putting an asterisk on this one. It's only one picture, and as we saw in the front relaxed, things can change on a dime depending on the timing of the photo. I think Ronnie could easily win this pose if he sucked in his midsection a bit more and wasn't getting out-angled. The front lat spread is close, but I give it to Ronnie. Levrone looks a little broader shoulder to shoulder maybe, but Ronnie's physique is much denser. He looks more conditioned, and while it's close up top, he smokes him in the lower half. Kevin cannot deal with those quads, which are sliced and diced all the way to the hip. Levrone's physique is more aesthetically pleasing, so I can see some people giving it to him, but I really doubt the judges would be swayed by that. Here's a second look with Cormier back in the frame, and yeah, Levrone's getting trounced. The legs alone seal his fate. I might even put Cormier ahead of him too, just because of that. Although I do like Kevin's upper body a lot. Okay, and for the side chest, we've got almost nothing to work with. Believe it or not, this was the only full body shot I came across, and it's tough to judge because we're not seeing them head on. All you can really tell is that it's very close. They're about equal in size. Coleman is probably a little thicker through the pecs, but Kevin's midsection is a lot more detailed. On the other hand, he's smoother through the lower body. Here's a close-up that confirms Ronnie's chest was thicker and rounder, but otherwise I prefer Kevin. He's hitting it perfectly. It just doesn't get any better than this. Well, at least as far as the upper body's concerned, since that's all we can see right now. In the end, I'm going with the Maryland Muscle Machine. Ronnie looked great here too, but Levrone's superior execution and midsection put him ahead. But again, this one is inconclusive since it wasn't a proper full body assessment. And just like we saw with the rear relaxed, the back double bi is a blowout. Ronnie is smoking him here. That thick, knotted back has more grooves and crevices than an aerial view of the Rocky Mountains, never mind the lower body disparity. Kevin is really only competitive in the arms, shoulders, and calves. Everywhere else, he's losing and losing badly. Cormier is a clear second in this pose. The rear lat spread didn't even have a single comparison photo, so I whipped together this little side-by-side, and as you can see, it's an automatic win for Ronnie. I guess if you wanted to be really generous, you could argue that Kevin's got more true width and a better V-shape, but let's not sugarcoat it, he's getting destroyed. Coleman's lower back, glutes, and hamstrings are all light years ahead. The traps are bulging out, and even his calves look better right now. This one's no contest. But fear not, Levrone fans, the back segment is over, and now we return to the side and front poses, probably none more favorable for him than the side triceps. This was one of Kevin's strongest shots, and arguably Ronnie's weakest, so the decision is easy. Really, the only area I like more on Ronnie is the thighs, but Kevin is crushing him upstairs right now. Here's another look, a minor improvement for Coleman because now you can see a faint outline of a triceps horseshoe, but come on. Anybody who doesn't vote for Kevin in this pose needs to get their eyes checked. And unfortunately, it doesn't get much better for the king in the ab and thigh. Levrone takes this one too. His midsection is on another level, although it sucks that we only get this one crappy pick to judge off of. But just to play devil's advocate for a second, Kevin isn't flexing his thighs here, so one could argue that Coleman deserves it on the basis of better head-to-toe development. Yes, those abs are ugly and his midsection looks bloated, but at least he's showing some definition in that area, whereas that's nowhere to be seen in Levrone's undersized legs. Even so, I cannot in good conscience award the ab and thigh to Ronnie this year, not with a midsection like that. Even in 2004, when he was closing in on 300 pounds, it looked better than this. If we're being honest, I'd probably give it to Chris Cormier, since he's the only one of these three with good abs and quads. Okay, and as for the most muscular, I don't believe it was technically mandatory this year. I think it was in 2004 when they first made it official and started actually calling for it. But nonetheless, let's check it out, since it was the most photographed pose by far. Enter the German Giant. If you've been wondering about Gunter's absence so far, well, he was rarely, if ever, directly included in the top call-out comparisons. It was only in the last confirmation round and the top 6 pose down where he finally got a chance to shine and stand next to the champ. And boy oh boy, when he did, it proved to be a real eye-opener. Ronnie is getting exposed right now. Okay, so unlike other commentators, I wouldn't go so far as to say he's getting dwarfed or smoked, but Gunter is definitely winning this comparison. He was harder and more conditioned from the front, and his tall frame allowed him to outsize even the great Ronnie Coleman. What I'm most impressed by right here is the legs. We already saw how dominant Coleman was in that regard while posing beside Kevin Levrone, but Gunter's quads are probably even better still. Certainly they're more vascular. He really brought the freak factor this year. Here's another one where you can note the obvious height advantage. Again, I wouldn't say dwarfing, but Gunter's obviously outsizing him here. I'm not too keen on this variation though, extending the one arm downwards like that. It looks a little odd and I'm not sure what he was going for there. He doesn't have the lateral triceps of Kevin Levrone to really pull that off. This one must have come right at the end because you can see the rest of them filing out in the background, but these two stayed behind, and man, that was a mistake on Ronnie's part. He is getting owned in this shot big time. He probably should have opted for the crab instead. Truthfully speaking, he never had the best structure for the hands on hip, which is more suited for guys with broad shoulders and trim waistlines. For the record though, I'm not crazy about Gunter's structure here either. He looks very thick through the waist himself, but if the choice is between these two, it's pretty clear who to go with in this instance. Here's a rare crab shot from Kevin Levrone going up against Big Ron. And this one's close, but I like Kevin a little more. The angle isn't ideal for Ronnie maybe, but Kevin's shoulders and triceps are so round, it's ridiculous. And his pecs look just as thick as Ronnie's now too. Coleman's not locking in the legs, and his lower body advantage is negated anyway when they bend over like that. Here we go again, but this time with Levrone in his signature shot. Ronnie looks more impressive from this angle with the better lighting though. You can see all sorts of striations in his chest and very defined shoulders and arms. Kevin looks immaculate up top, but he's forgetting or just neglecting to flex his legs, so I gotta mark him down for that. He might still take this, but it's debatable. It's definitely closer than I would have expected. And finally, here's one last Gunter comparison, and oh man, yep, he had Ronnie's number in the most muscular this year. Bigger, harder, more defined, there's not much you can say in Coleman's defense. However, and this is a big caveat here, guys, this is just one pose. And it wasn't technically even scored, at least not officially as with the other mandatories. I'd like to see how Gunter would stack up in some of the other poses, especially the side chest and the 2 back shots. Does anyone think for a minute he'd be smoking Ronnie in the back double by? So this is my problem with trying to review this contest. The footage is just too scarce to make meaningful evaluations. Did Gunter deserve to beat Ronnie? Maybe, but you can't argue that on the basis of one pose alone. That's disingenuous and frankly stupid for anyone to say so, because we know that bodybuilding contests aren't judged that way. So until I see photos of Gunter versus Ronnie and all 7 mandatories, I wouldn't jump to conclusions. What I will say though is that Schlierkamp absolutely looked like top 3 material in my eyes, if not top 2, and again, maybe even Mr. Olympia worthy. I'm not ruling that out. So I would say that yes, he got robbed, but not in the sense of not winning the title, just in the sense of not cracking top 3. And as for Kevin Levrone, I think he put up a valiant fight considering his enormous disadvantage in the 2 largest muscle groups, namely the back and the legs. I ended up giving him the side relaxed, side triceps, and ab and thigh, and arguably he won the front relaxed, front double, and side chest also, although those were somewhat inconclusive. So he really excelled from the side and generally looked pretty good from the front. But when you're lagging behind that badly from the back, and when you're getting thoroughly outmuscled and outclassed from all angles through the lower body, do you really deserve to knock out the champ? No way, not a chance. So I think second place was a very fair finish for Kevin Levrone this year. Maybe if he would have trained year-round and dedicated himself to bodybuilding full-time, instead of fucking off to play songs in his rock band for half the year or whatever he did, maybe he could have held on to those wheels as he aged, since they were actually a strong point early on in his career. And maybe then he would have deserved to win in 2002. But as it was, I don't think so. He was probably lucky to even receive second. And lastly, as promised, let's just quickly check out the scorecards to see if we can puzzle this together a bit better. Okay, so in 2002, they actually had 4 rounds, and I'm going to level with you guys, I'm not entirely sure what they all represent. I believe, based on other contemporaneous Olympias, that the first 3 scores represent the symmetry round, the muscularity round, and the individual posing routines respectively, while that last score has to be either the final confirmation round and or the pose down, since it only pertains to the top 6. But again, I'm not 100% sure. I couldn't find any source that spelled it out explicitly, and of course the IFBB is too lazy and useless to explain it themselves. I'm sure there will be someone in the comments who can confirm it for us. But anyway, based on this assumption, Ronnie dominated the prejudging with perfect scores, but Kevin Levrone actually beat him in the finals. Chris Cormier was second in the symmetry round, but fell off a bit after that. And Gunter, damn guys, Gunter got shafted pretty bad in the prejudging, I'm not gonna lie. He came on strong in the finals, but there was simply too much ground to make up. To an extent, I'm sure it was the judges overlooking him, but it's possible that he simply wasn't as dialed in during prejudging and, tightened up in the evening or the next day's show. I'm not sure if back then they broke it up into 2 days or if it was all in one. But anyway, we didn't really get a good glimpse of the guy until the finals, so I have no idea. I do think he should have scored better in round 4, though. Tied for third with 17 seems a little far-fetched. So yeah, guys, that's my take on this 2002 Mr. Olympia. I wish there were more photos and footage to go by, but unfortunately, we just gotta make do with what we've got sometimes. I tried to be as thorough as possible while keeping the runtime reasonable, so hopefully you found it worthwhile, and maybe this even helps to kind of temper your opinion on what happened back then. It's not that I'm trying to stick up for Ronnie or be biased towards him. Like I said at the beginning, this was probably the worst physique he ever brought to the stage during his reign. Certainly the most underwhelming anyway. But at the end of the day, he was still very dominant in several key poses, and I think he probably did do enough to hold on. At least based on the comparisons we had to go by. Who knows, if Gunter had been standing there beside him the whole time, maybe I would have arrived at a very different conclusion. But that's pure speculation at this point, and it's not what these reviews are all about. People will always go back to the 2002 GNC Show of Strength, where Gunter famously defeated Ronnie as proof that he was screwed here. But that's only half valid. Those were different shows, and they occurred 3 weeks apart. Well, let's just say that in the world of professional bodybuilding, that's huge. A lot can happen in 3 weeks. Ronnie could have faded, and Gunter could have hardened up. So it's not really a sound argument. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more if you enjoyed. As always, this has been the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.